Hello, friends. My name's
Not
B.
yet, not
Moore.
yet, not yet.
Oh, tell me when. Tell me when.
We're on Facebook Live. We're now going to broadcast. Here comes Kendall. There she is.
Hey, there she is.
All right. Hey, Kendall, we are now broadcasting. Ready?
All right, now.
B, give them a second to let them load, and you'll see them at the bottom.
Okay. Hello, friends. My name's B. Moorhead. I'm Texas Impact's Executive Director, and I'm happy to welcome you to the third panel in our Texas Faith in Democracy Lifting Dallas Voices for Justice event. This is the second in a series of conversations that we've been having throughout the state this summer and fall, featuring faith and community leaders, advocates, and Texas Impact staff, talking about the importance of Texans of faith participating in the policy process and discussing nuts and bolts strategies on how you and your congregation can be effective participants in democracy. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Texas Impact, we're the state's oldest and largest interfaith network. We're a membership organization, and if today's event inspires you to get more involved, we hope you'll consider joining. There will be a link dropping into the chat momentarily. Texas Impact exists to put faith into action. We equip faith leaders and their congregations with the information, opportunities, and outreach tools to educate their communities and engage with lawmakers on pressing public policy issues. We help people live out their faith in the public square, moving the faith community from charity to justice. Communities of faith have a heritage of service. We engage in direct acts of compassion toward the most vulnerable members of our community. While we recognize our calling to be the hands and feet that serve our neighbors, we also believe collectively we can make a broader impact by changing public policy. And that's where Texas Impact steps in. This fall, the most important policy action Texans of faith can take is to partner with their neighbors and local officials to ensure that every county has a safe and fair election. Our Texas Faith Votes campaign, which you can find in the chat, I believe coming up in a second, has tools for you and your congregation to promote safe, accountable voting, including a checklist for those who want to ensure a safe, fair election, a pledge that you'll vote in the November election, a challenge to recruit election workers, which will be discussed in the next panel, or was just discussed in the past panel, ways to vote by mail, which we're going to talk about right now. Before I introduce our speakers today, I also want to describe the technology for today. You should see at the bottom of your screen a chat and a Q&A feature. And we're treating the chat as a place to have kind of a water cooler type discussion, something that you might talk with your seat mates about. If you want to ask questions for the presenters, you could ask those questions in the Q&A box. So today's presentation is going to be primarily by Kendall Gladish, who is the, Social Witness Committee Chair at University Presbyterian Church in Austin. That happens to be the church I go to, but I'm very much working for Kendall at this point. And in a second, I'm going to start our PowerPoint, and Kendall's going to talk to you about a really specific vote by mail project that University Church did this summer. So let's see about starting the PowerPoint. And here we go. All right. Kendall, would you like to take it away?
I would be delighted. Thank you, B. And thank you to Texas Impact for all the help you provided us and University Presbyterian. I had to laugh out loud. I hope you didn't hear it when B said she was working for me, because if you know B Moorhead, as we agreed today at another vote by mail activity at church, I am in the grips of a force of nature. But I am delighted to be so and to be here to tell you about how we helped our members to be able to vote by mail. Obviously, with the threat of COVID-19, many Americans are concerned about the health risks of voting in person. And in Texas right now, you have to be a senior or disabled or a number of other things to be able to vote by mail. It's not universal, as we know, but we wanted to help all of those people, older, incarcerated, disabled, to be able to vote by mail without and not risk infection. This is a new process for a lot of people, and as you know, it is not always easy here in Texas to vote by mail. So we thought it was important for our community to work with others to ensure that anybody in our congregation who is vulnerable be able to get the help they need to vote safely at home. So we started out with vote by mail video orchestrated by Texas Impact. And our then associate pastor, Crystal Leedy, and I were the actors, although my role was quite small. And then with the Social Witness Committee at University Presbyterian, we wanted especially to help our senior members. And at that time, we took this on in May. We were looking forward to the Texas runoff, and COVID-19 was raging on. So we learned a lot, and we developed what I hope is a good template that we think will be useful to other congregations. And I'm truly delighted to be able to share it with you now. When we formed this list, I was kind of amazing because you have to understand, we were doing this on the fly. All of us are old enough to have been on teams and work groups and all of that sort of thing. But this time we were working with all volunteers, all of us quarantined, but we did have a great social witness committee. We built our list, and that was with the help of our church secretary, all of us working online. And when we told her we needed a reliable list of members who were over 65 or at home or had disabilities, she was able to produce that in a matter of hours. And so we formed our team. We built a list and we made vote by mail packets. We delivered them or mailed them. We checked in, we kept good notes with the help of Texas Impact interns. And we assessed at the end how we did. And now we're gearing up for what I think could be an even larger challenge given the current threats to the US postal system for the fall. So, and I will tell you at this point, we had a kind of a rally day for our church to do drive-by pickups of church swag and Bibles for kids. And we did a booth with for election integrity. And every older person who came up said, what are we going to do now? You know, we got our ballots. We know we'll get our ballots for the November election. So we had done some research and worked with some other people. We had a list of the USPS Board of Governors and their emails, and then the list of the senators and representatives. So we passed that out. Nobody needed any of the other information. This is a pretty well-informed group of people. But I will tell you that the anxiety and distrust over whether or not ballots mailed will get to where they belong and be counted is a huge concern for seniors. In our social witness committee, we have a committee of about 8 or 9, and only 3 or 4 were really engaged with this, but that is okay because Texas Impact was backing us up all the way. Their interns were helping with our record keeping. And the kids we mostly served at UPC were in classes and all that during the first part of this thrust, but we will certainly call on them in the future. And I recommend that you do the same. So after our church secretary, Jan Hames, produced this spreadsheet, we noted that we had 205 seniors or stay-at-home people. And of that, only 153 of them had email addresses, or 92 had phone numbers. And we also used the church email, or the, newsletter that is emailed, to get a hold of people who may only read the church newsletter, because that is sent by mail to them. So that way we put together our list of people who wanted us to deliver the vote by mail applications. And that included, B showed you the slide earlier. We just put them in a plastic bag. It was the, obviously the application for a ballot to vote by mail, a little set of instructions from us, and a stamped envelope to Travis County for us, but we had a few people who were in Hayes or Williamson, so we made sure those got to the, the right match. But we knew we were going to be dropping these off when people might not be at home, or said, stick it on my front porch. And so we had to make sure that they weren't going to get rained on or blew away. So that's why we put them into these plastic bags. And also, we wanted to make it as easy as possible. Now, I am well over 65, but I can still get to post offices and things like that. But for people who are in assisted living or senior residences or other restricted places, or just can't get around, we wanted to make this so simple. So we stamped the envelopes and addressed them for them. And we also made a minute for mission pitch from the pulpit, such as it is right now. So in the first email we sent out, we got 44 people who said, yes, I want that. And a lot of very cordial responses from another 35 or so people who said, I already did that, but thank you, or deliver applications because my next door neighbors don't belong to a church or aren't active in either party. So we picked up some other things like that. And people, even if they didn't need ballot applications, were really appreciative that UPC was getting into this. And we were scrupulous about emphasizing this was not in any way partisan. I delivered a number of ballots to people who I know will cancel out my vote, but all that matters is they're able to do it safely. So Texas Impact, after the primary or after November's election, does have the capacity to go back and check and see if those people to whom we delivered applications were able to vote, which will help Texas Impact measure its the actual outcomes quantitatively. For those of you who are jumping into this, you will have to print out applications from the Secretary of State website. We tried to get the Secretary of State, who happens to be located a few blocks away, to just say, put them out on the landing and label them for University Presbyterian. We wanted about 100. And they said, no, you'll have to go to the website. So I thought, okay, we can do that. Well, you have to print them out 5 at a time. And so that was not an obstacle. We worked around it and printed out about 100 ballots, 5 at a time. Some people were under the impression that you could get your ballot applications directly from the county. That, we were told, in Travis County is no longer possible. The Secretary of State controls that. And so we couldn't use that outlet either, but we got them. And we put them in plastic bags, as I told you, to protect them from the winter. Not winter hardly, the weather. The process of delivery was fun. We just divided it up. Most people were there, but when they weren't, they were expecting them and let us know they got them. And a few people who really lived way out in rural ranches and things like that, we did use the US postal system, and they got them. So after about 2 weeks, we made a round of phone calls to make sure that they had received their ballots, because another caution is you don't get any confirmation. If you mail in your application, you just live on faith that you're going to get your ballot in time. And that's another thing that people are very, very concerned about in front of this next election. The other thing that was unexpected is sometimes when we delivered or when we sent out emails or called people, they said, oh my gosh, I didn't realize it was due, I think it was July 2nd. So even if they don't need the information, we're all human. We lose track of deadlines and things like that. So we did encounter some issues with, for the primary, people had not noted their party. So sometimes they only got the nonpartisan or unopposed elections to vote in, and there was enough consternation about that. We helped them get back in touch with the county and get their corrected ballots in time. But it's an arduous process, so we don't have to worry about that in the November election. But I do think it's important to remember that you don't get confirmation. After the primary was over on July 14th, we began a series of follow-up calls to all 65 of the members that we had delivered to learn more about their vote by mail experiences and whether or not they got them on time. And we finished that process for probably a total of about 88. And we heard other things through the church grapevine that there was a lot of uneasiness, and this was even before the US Postal System's leaders, current leaders, took steps that really threatened the viability of the postal system itself, much less or much more how they're going to be able to help people in October and November. So I think we kept pretty good notes about all the applications that we delivered and individuals who had observations and comments. 5 of our people did not receive their ballots to vote until it was too late, and 5 were very confused about the box 6A, which relates to the party declaration and all that. But all 3 of those people, and 3 received the wrong ballot. So they were able to vote, but one of them had to, because she got it so late, she had to surrender her ballot when she felt like she had no choice. She showed up to vote on site. It is a very serious concern to us that 10 individuals out of 76 had issues when they were trying to vote by mail. That's a really significant percentage if you start multiplying the pool. So this is one reason we are not slowing down a bit for the November election. We already anticipated digging right back in this month. And now with the additional threats to the postal system, we are going to dig in even more. And as I mentioned, all of the people we're serving are extraordinarily concerned and worried. And that honestly makes me angry, because as B said one time, they're throwing the greatest generation out on the curb. At the time, many of them are worried about this election. Many of them have been lifelong voters and conscientious voters. And I've had people say, I don't care what they tell me, I am going in to vote in person if I have to practically wear a hazmat suit. So we really, really hope that lots of congregations around the state do jump into this sort of thing. And you're going to need a good team, and you're going to need a couple people who are really good on Excel sheets so that you could keep meticulous records. It's kind of a multitask. There are all sorts of different activities you have to undertake and coordinate. And when none of us can meet in the same room, it got a little crazy sometimes, but we managed to do it. We and the slide that B has up there now is today is rally day at University Presbyterian, and they were trying to figure out how to do it. And this is normally pitched to the kids. You know, they come and pick up their swag and their Bibles and get backpack stickers and all that. And we just sort of horned in and said, well, can the vote by mail people get there? And we did. And we did not distribute one application to vote by mail because it was a very limited pool, but we distributed a lot of email and contact lists for the people to talk to or to email or call this next week before they have a vote, if they ever do, in the Senate about this additional postal service allocation. Let's see, is there anything else? One thing that is important, whatever form of communication you use, and you'll probably use all of them, is make sure you have two people consistently identified, phone number, email, who can answer questions at any time, because they are going to come up. And I told B, I never expected to become Election Day Central for a bunch of earnest Presbyterians. And it's a lot of phone calls, but it's okay because we want these people to have the information they need and deserve. What we didn't do and we will do in the future with Texas Impact's help is do a survey rather than phone calls. There was a little testiness about some of the follow-up phone calls, none of the pre-primary phone calls. But after the primary's over, you figure you might get a couple, at least a month break from the political calls. And even if you're the nicest church member of all, and they hear your voice and they know who you are, when they know you want to see if you got your ballot and you sent it in on time, they get a little impatient. So I think a survey to see how it went for them, if they had any issues with any of the processes. And you can do surveys on Google Docs, and I would highly recommend that. So then you get to stand out in the hot sun for 2.5 hours and pass out stuff and talk to your fellow congregation members. But it's really nice because you get to see them in person. So, it may be that churches do come by church and pick up your application to vote by mail in the next couple of weeks or anything else. But we're going to explore every option available to us. This has become a real cause in our church because we're all citizens of a country that to date has protected our rights to vote by mail, not to mention worship, how we want to and how we're led to. So we've had a first round victory lap, but we've got a long way to go. So I hope that gives you some idea of how we went around it. We've got a little report that B could probably make available to you if you're interested in it. But I think everybody on my committee would agree. It was exhilarating. It was a lot of detail work. I mean, it was just really grubby work sometimes, but we feel good about it. And we believe it's really crucially important to every conscientious person in Texas, whatever religion or creed.
Well, thank you, Kendall. That was a great description of a really specific process. And that's, I think, what people who are participating currently really want is to know exactly what the next steps are. So thanks for breaking it down like that. I want to tell everyone that Texas Impact put out a publication last week. It's available online. It's called The Most Powerful Instrument. Josh and his intern wrote most of it. A lot goes through the history of voting by mail, absentee voting in Texas and in the United States, and has detailed information about Texas law and voting by mail, the things people need to know if they're a voter, the things you need to know if you're going to volunteer and help other people to vote by mail. But in the report, one section is a breakdown of this information that Kendall just walked through with you about University Presbyterian Church's specific process. And so hopefully that'll be a way for you to have that at your fingertips as you decide how your congregation is going to move forward. With that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and move us to Q&A. It looks like we've got a lot in the chat, and I know we've got a lot of questions queued up in the Q&A. So Scott and Josh, do you guys want to, Josh, you want to go ahead and start answering questions?
Yeah, I'd just like to, I start going through the Q&A, I guess, take the easiest ones first. If I get a mail-in ballot, can I change my mind and vote in person? Yes.
Yes.
Preferably, I would recommend you take it to the early voting clerk, which is the address on the carrier envelope that you would mail back in. The reason I say that is because you'll need a voter ID, but all you need to do is take the mail-in ballot, take your voter ID, and it's there. If you go to your polling location on election day to surrender your ballot, it's going to cause lines. It's going to be a little bit, you'll still get to vote, obviously, but it's going to be a little bit more onerous process for the election judges to cancel out your mail-in ballot and then get you set up to vote in person. And one of the things we're really trying to minimize is long lines at the polls on election day. That long lines disenfranchise voters. So yes is the answer to that. I had not heard that Dallas County had ballot tracking like UPS or FedEx. Most of the state does not. Texas has ballot tracking for military and overseas voters, but not for domestic voters. So most people in Texas cannot confirm that it has been counted. They will get a rejection notice if it has not been counted, with a reason for that rejection on that rejection letter. So if you do not get a letter, you can at least assume it's been counted, but ballot tracking would be much better. The next question is, how do I know if it's been counted or rejected? And am I entitled to correct any defect? So no, some states do offer an opportunity to cure if you've messed up. Texas is not one of them, unfortunately, and that's the thing we're going to have to address legislatively. A couple more questions. How do we educate people so they do not commit errors that would result in their ballot being disqualified? The two big things that'll get your ballot disqualified is if you forget to sign your name to the carrier envelope. They're going to check your signature against the signature on your application that you sent in to make sure that that matches. So if you forget to sign it, that could be one way it would get disqualified. The other way it would get disqualified is if you reopened it for some reason. Once you seal it, do not reopen it. But for the most part, the rejection rates are pretty low. We're still having information come in. We're not ready to release a report on this yet, but we have been doing open records requests with the 30 largest counties to see what those rejection rates are. The preliminary data that's come in has revealed that it does not happen that often. It is below 2%. And if you have long lines on election day, and if you have new polling locations, that leads to a greater than 2% disenfranchisement of people who work and of people who have children. So that is why voting by mail is still extremely important. The big reason, and overwhelming reason, 85% of the rejected ballots, at least in Harris County, a big county, are rejected because they arrived late, which is a postal service issue. And we'll talk a little bit more about that because I'm sure that's on everybody's minds. And then the other big issue is somebody forgot to sign the carrier envelope. Those are really the main reasons, and the biggest one being overwhelmingly that it just arrived too late to be counted. Mail-in ballot counting is more labor intensive. How do we get enough funding for staff and other costs? So there's three sources where it could be coming from: the federal government, the state government, or obviously your counties. The state's not going to put any money into it. They'd have to call a special session to appropriate it. The federal government, at least the U.S. Senate, has refused to appropriate it. The House has passed a bill that the Senate is sitting on to appropriate that money. So it's unlikely there's going to be a lot of new money. The counties, the burden is on the counties. Nevertheless, let's talk about numbers. Normally, 8% of the electorate in Texas votes by mail. If everybody over 65 voted in Texas, it could be about 1 in 4 voters. So it could quadruple from 8% to 25%. Nevertheless, it just slows things down. It doesn't necessarily lead to disenfranchisement. So it'd be nice to have more machines. I'm sure counties are thinking about that, but it's really going to vary by county. And then third, postal system rules and ballot rules do not always match up. How do we coordinate with the postal system to make sure this runs smoothly? And this is really a very important question I want to address with regard to the postal system. Been a lot of news about this. I think I want to start out by saying a lot of the news is fear, right? I don't think I really understood what FDR meant when he said we have nothing to fear but fear itself until just recently in our nation's history. So the number one thing I would say is keep calm and vote on. Can you trust the mail? If you don't, push deadlines.
Mhm.
So here's the deal. A lot of this is really a psychological campaign to get people to fear it. Keep calm, vote on, and get to work right now. If you do everything way ahead of schedule, you'll be okay. And so let's talk a little bit about those key dates that I really want you to watch. The legal one, so let's back up and say, first you have to apply, and then you have to cast the ballot once it comes to your house. So let's start at the very beginning of the process. In fact, I should even back up to the absolute very beginning of the process, which is registration. If you are not registered to vote in Texas, you obviously can't vote by mail. The vote by mail application, when it arrives, is going to be checked against the voter roll. So, and I want to say this extremely bluntly, even if you know you were registered to vote, even if you voted in the last primary, I want you to go check your registration. And I'm going to put a link in so you can do that right now. The timeline to do that is before this call is over. And here's the link to go check your voter registration. Why do I say this? I fear shenanigans. And that's a nice way to put it. I fear a voter roll purge. So for those of you who may have watched during last session, there was a Secretary of State who was appointed by the governor. He was a former member of the governor's staff. Democrats in the Senate blocked his appointment because of a potential voting roll purge that got caught. Fast forward, we don't have a Secretary of State. We have a different Secretary of State. But as a staff, many of our staff people work the polls as election judges on election day. We take off and we do our civic duty for democracy. And our staff saw, they caught a handful of anecdotal but concerning things. At one polling location where they were working, about 7 to 8 people had been marked inactive by the Secretary of State. Several of them had voted in the 2018 general election. They were not inactive. All were people of color or students at universities or had just recently moved. So I really want to be you to be 100% sure that you are registered, even if you know you are. Check anyway. Step number 2 is after you're sure you're registered, apply to vote by mail right away. The legal deadline is October 23rd, but do not push that 11-day deadline. The United States Postal Service sent a letter to our Secretary of State saying that really you need to have that application in the mail by October 14th at the absolute latest. I would advise you to have another date on your calendar, September 21st. Make sure your application is in the mail by September 21st. I picked that date because it gives your application a week to get to the county and a week to get to the county before the counties do their very first mail out of mail-in ballots. Counties will do a big bulk mail out to everybody who's applied 38 to 30 days out. And you want to be a part of that very first mail out because it will give you, even if the mail is a week late, it will still give you 3 weeks to make sure that your ballot is cast and it gets back in. So let's talk about casting a ballot. Legally, if it's received by the day after the election, they'll count it. but the United States Postal Service again recommends at least 1 week to ensure that your ballot is received by the county. We would recommend as soon as possible. As soon as you get that mail-in ballot, send it in. So let's talk a little bit about what you're going to do if it's late. And by late, I mean, say the ballot arrives in your mailbox a week or less, or just too close to comfort for you, whatever that may be. If it arrives late, you are going to go ahead and fill it out, seal it, take your photo ID, your voter ID, and take it down to the early voting clerk. We understand that a number of people may not be able to do this because they have people at home or may themselves be very susceptible to the virus. And that's why we have to get voting by mail to work, and you have to do things very early. But for those who are able, if it arrives late, be prepared to go in person. If it doesn't arrive at all, which happened to 2 people at University Presbyterian, still, if at all possible, go to the polls in person on election day. Explain that to the election judge. They will check. It's possible that the county never got your application and you'll vote as normal. It's also possible that something did happen in the mail, in which case you'll have to vote provisionally, but it is worth voting provisionally, where you'll fill out an affidavit and explain what happened so that your vote can get counted. I want to point one thing that's not been in the news. The governor had a proclamation at the end of July, giving everybody an extra week of in-person early voting. In that proclamation, and it did not make the news as much as I would have liked, it also allows you to take that mail-in ballot in person anytime, not just on election day, but anytime, any day, as soon as you get it. So if you have any qualms about the U.S. Postal Service, you can still take that mail-in ballot in person at any time. There is some litigation on this. We're watching it. The far right is challenging the governor's authority to do that. But again, that's just a lawsuit that's been filed, and let's go ahead and plan on the governor's proclamation prevailing. Scott, have I missed any questions in the Q&A or over in the chat thing? I'm trying to look at both at the same time.
I don't think you've missed any, but you might want to talk about how someone can find out where their early voting clerk is, and if it's possible that there's more than one location for that person.
Yeah, so this is going to vary by county. Your early voting clerk will be at the elections office, and you'll know that because it is the address printed on the front of the carrier envelope. That will certainly be one location you could take it to. Some counties will have satellite offices where you may be able to take it in person. I don't know enough about how Dallas County is operating to know if they're going to have more than one location.
So we have a question here. What is the most effective way to communicate with our senators about concerns around voting, mail-in voting, and funding for the Postal Service? Are calls or emails better? I think we would say calls are important, but we'd encourage you to do actually a 1-2 punch of calling and then tweeting at. And I know a lot of people don't do Twitter. A lot of people are not super enthusiastic about setting up a Twitter account just for the purpose of sending a cranky email to a lawmaker. It's really important because right now, a lot of the systems that normally would be in place to make public what kind of constituent communications lawmakers are getting aren't there now. There's nobody in the Capitol, so no one can see the traffic in and out of the offices. There's not the same opportunity to, wave signs out front of their district office or whatever. So Twitter's your one-stop shop to make sure the elected official knows that you know, that they know, that all your friends know, that all the other people on Twitter know, that they know that you said fund the Postal Service. That's what it's got to be like. So what you want to do, Texas Impact has a list, and I don't know, Scott, if it's convenient for you to post where our phone numbers for our Texas senators are into the chat. If not, it's fine. You can easily find them on our website. But we have numbers that we'd love for you to call for Senator Cruz and Senator Cornyn that are trackable numbers. Basically, they're numbers that allow us to count those calls so that we can say to those senators, we know for sure that you've gotten hundreds of calls or however many it is. But you'll break down and sign up for Twitter. Thank you. That's good. You should. But what we want you to do is to call them, and then you go on Twitter and you send a specific message, right? It says, "Dear at Senator Cornyn," for example, or "Dear at Senator Cruz, I just called and left you a message," or "I appreciated the opportunity to talk to your staff member about this issue. It's very important to me." And then you tag Texas Impact. We recommend that you tag your denomination or your faith tradition. So if you are United Methodist, we would recommend you tag United Methodist Church and Society. If you are Muslim, we would recommend you tag Muslim Public Affairs Council. But somehow let the world know constituents are calling. That's what builds the pressure that actually makes change.
Yeah, and I see one more question about signatures, and it's a good question. The question is essentially, I registered 30 years ago, and my signature over time has changed. Should I try to sign it like I did 30 years ago on my voter registration card, or should I use the signature on my application for ballot by mail? So if you are interested in this issue, our publication has a section that goes quite in depth to how the signature verification committees work. But the short answer I would say is sign it just like your application, the most recent application. A signature verification committee can go into the voter registration records, but usually only if there's a question from that most recent application.
Well, I think we are coming close to time. Do you have any last questions or thoughts? Kendall, do you have any last thoughts you want to leave people with? Is it okay if people reach out to you if they want real specific information about how you made your packets or anything like that?
Oh, absolutely. I'm happy to answer any of those questions. And one thing, on a very local level, knowing that we can submit the vote by mail applications to the county, we'll put a team of people together to actually take the people from their homes, especially the seniors or people with disabilities, to the Travis County office, and let them have this opportunity to do it without the U.S. postal system, because it may be fear more than reality, but it's driving a lot of seniors who are extremely concerned about what they're hearing in the news. So we'll do anything we can to help our people and other congregations in Austin. So yes, by all means.
Perfect. Well, I'm going to give Josh and Scott a couple of minutes break before our next session. The last one is at 5:15. Again, we're going to send out these recordings to anyone who registered for the event. We want to thank everyone who's participating. And again, I'm going to say, if this information is helpful to you, we really hope you'll go to texasimpact.org/join to become a member of Texas Impact and support the work of equipping Texans of faith, clergy, and congregations to become effective advocates for justice. And with that, I think we're done, and we'll see you in 15 minutes.